Hi everybody, let's get started with a new lesson. I've got a bunch of rubber stamps today. Script writing is my theme today. I've got a couple other little stamps here, but I didn't end up using them. I'm mostly using script, but again, use whatever you have. I'm just showing you technique. You don't have to follow exactly what I'm doing. I've got my trusted pencil crayons, which I start every painting, and today I'm also doing gelato crayons, so we'll have fun with those. As you know, I like to hold the pencil at the very tip so that I cannot control. This is not to draw shapes. Again, you don't need to be an artist here. This is strictly to get into my zone and at the same time put some background marks on my page. I usually use 4 or 5 of these colors. They're complementary to the paints that I like to use. So again, by now I'm already in my zone. I'm not thinking about anything. So it's already helped doing a soul journal in that I've got lost in mindfulness. I'm not thinking about my day. So those gelato crayons, I've decided today, rather than use 3 colors, which I usually use, color schemes, I'm using 2 colors. These are Faber-Castell, but I have 3 different types of these crayons, and they all work very similarly. So whatever it is that you've got, you color them on like a crayon. So it just seems like you're using a wax crayon, but they're not wax, they're paint. If I was to use a watercolor paper with more texture on the page, it would, as I'm coloring this down, it would pick up some of that texture and give it a different pattern. But this is mixed media paper, it's a lot smoother. So it is what it is. I'm sticking with the greens, blues, and little bits of the bright green, and I've got that sage green. I'm calling that sage green that I used previously, I'm calling that my neutral, but a lot of that will get hidden. So what I'm trying to do is just color with these to cover the white page. Don't worry, we'll do lots of white later on, but for now, for my underpainting, which is what we're creating now. The first layer was just doing mark making just to get started. Now we're doing the underlayer. It's nice to have an underlayer when you do any kind of painting because it just gives a new dimension to your page, even if most of it gets covered up. So this is an underpainting. I'm, again, sticking with a color scheme of greens and blues in various shades of those colors. There's a little bit of yellow there. I'm not loving the yellow so much. I wanted more blue and green, so we'll take care of that shortly. Sorry, my funky hair sticks in the way, but I've got the camera mounted above, and to do some of the detail, I end up putting my head forward. I apologize. So you can see how it's going on. It's coloring on and picking up the texture of that page. We will be smudging it now. I use my fingers and I press very firmly. This is one of 2 ways to spread the color around. Because these are water soluble, it's okay to spread like this, but I can't get rid of those smudge lines where I colored it down. So I want to make a more uniform pattern of color. So I always activate it with a spray bottle of water, and I use a plain paintbrush to move this color around. These gelatos are wonderful because they do move around they respond to water very quickly. So it's spreading it around and it's brightening up the color. If I would have just kept it smudged, it wouldn't be as bright as this. And I want happy bright colors today. I'm wiping it off where it's become muddy. As soon as that yellow hits the blue or the sage especially, it became dirty. So whenever I spread one color over the other, I end up making a little bit of a muddy mess like right there. So I'm going to dab some of that away. And that's okay because you can reapply. I don't want any muddy bits here. And that's the trick with doing these abstracts is don't create mud. If you do, wipe it off and go over it again. Using my finger to press a little more firmly because it can spread out that color a little more into the paper than the brush did. Again, I'm dabbing anything where it was muddy, and I will apply some more color. See how those pencil crayon lines are showing through even though I've put this over top? That's why I do those. Most of those will get covered up, but it's fun to watch the transformation of the underpainting and the mark making to where you end up. And a little bit like meditating, you know, which I do a lot. You don't know where you're going or what's going to happen during it. So with meditating, you've got to open up your heart and your soul and be free to whatever happens. And that's what happens when I do these. I want more blue up there, so it's never too late to add more and spread it around. When you're traveling, you can bring these or Stabilo Woodies and a plain paintbrush and water with you, and you've got a paint supply. You don't need to bring a bunch of wet, messy paints. So I'll give that a good blow dry, but I speed up my blow drying in this video so that you don't have to painstakingly watch me for hours on end. There's a lot of blow drying, so you have to be patient. Keep that blow dryer handy. It's your best friend. I'm going to use archival ink here, and I'm going to stamp on those stamps that I showed you at the beginning. And these two colors are complementary to my story color palette. This is a square stamp, so when I stamp it, oh, by the way, I'm going to use a white page on top just to test it out. I don't want to make any mistakes. I want to make sure that these ink blots are full of ink and not dried out. So I'm just testing it there. I like that. I like this sage color. So I'm just making sure. So it is a square stamp, as I said, but I don't want this to look like a square stamp on the page. So I'm only pressing in certain areas to bring out that stamp. See how jagged and irregular that is? That's what I like. I'm pressing it in different places as well so that it's not a uniform effect everywhere. I'm trying to make a busy page now with script stamps, but I'm not trying to make them all the same. That would be boring. So notice already how the underpainting is moving into the background and the stamped layer is popping to the forward. I really like that. I like creating layers. So now I'm using the blue stamp pad with another script. This is a different shape, so I have to hold it up and down instead of sideways. It's a little harder not to get the edge there, but that's okay. If I didn't want it to look like a rectangular stamp, I could actually just add a little more beside there, but for now this is working. What I really, really enjoy is that these two stamps are both script, random script, but they're different sizes and different fonts. So even though I'm making this very busy now with script stamps, they're different. It's breaking up the pattern. I want the pattern random but everywhere, but I want it to be a variety. This one's more like almost a postal stamp. It's quite different. I want this one it's going to stand out because the font is a little thicker and it's a different shape, so it's going to show up differently. I like that. Just look at the fun already of this page. I like to do things in 3 areas, so I've moved that around to 3 spots. It's already a permanent archival stamp ink, but I'm not positive, and I know for a fact. So I'm using this fixative, which is a spray protective layer, because I know that those gelato crayons are very responsive to water, and I don't want to have them smudge. I'm liking what I see here, so I want to preserve it. Once I sprayed that on, I have to give it a really good dry. If I was to paint on this now, the brush would mix with that fixative. So bringing out my fluid matte medium again, I am going to go over this entire page with a layer of that matte medium because it protects everything underneath even more, and it provides an extra layer of coating over that mixed media paper so that this becomes way less responsive to water. It won't bubble as much, and it makes the paper stronger. It protects all the layers underneath that page. So I would suggest get a fairly big container. I'm using a small container here because of the recording, but I usually have a very big bottle of that on hand. I've changed the direction of my brush strokes as well, and I'm painting very lightly, almost like a feather. I gave that a good dry, and now I'm trying to decide if I was thinking of doing modeling paste with a stencil to give more texture, but I've changed my mind. I'm sticking with what I have so far. I'm showing you another way of putting paint or ink on the page. I am dousing a lot of water in this area, excessive amount of water in that spot there, and I'm putting a whole bunch of fluid acrylic. You could use ink, either works. And what I want to show you now is another technique where you can move paint along the page without being too contrived. I don't want to draw something on there. It would look too obvious. I like it to be organic. I love this technique because I think it's amazing to see how the paint moves around the page and how it changes in intensity as it does that. So I'm making sure have a lot of tissues on hand, especially at that coil center of the notebook. I don't want to wreck any other pages. But look at the fun. You couldn't think of painting that, but there it is. It's exposed itself. This is what it wants to be. So lots of dabbing with tissue. But look at how that high intense but high flow ink paint has so much intensity in it that when it gets really watered down, it goes bright, but it stays quite dark in other areas. So I'm having fun encouraging it to move in different directions, branching off. So I've just put a whole, and you've got to be very fearless and brave at this point. Just trust that things will work out, and if they didn't, you paint over it, no big deal. I'm having a lot of fun as I blow dry that I'm letting that extra wet paint branch off and flow where it wants to flow. The blow dryer helps move it around. Isn't that fun? I love it. But you do have to be fearless. So this shows you now up close all the different layers of what we've done so far. Now I'm bringing out my box, as you know I'm going to do, of printed tissue paper. I'm getting some of the white ones ready, but I am looking for some colors. So I'm thinking about the final coating of white over top, and I'm pulling out right now one of my favorites. But I'm going to dig to the bottom here because I know I've saved bits and pieces of colored tissue from previous sessions. And they're wonderful because, so what I'm going to do is pull out whatever I think might be complementary to the piece I've got so far. See, this is one trick that abstract artists can use to decide what color they need to add. Rather than be bold and pick the wrong color and paint it over your painting and then you've ruined it, you take printed tissue, you place it over top, and right away you can see, yeah, number one, these are complementary. Number two, look at the patterns that they add to this piece. So this is a wonderful technique that you should add. I don't want any muddy browns in this, so I'm pulling away any parts that have the brown. But look at that. You just rotate it around and decide, do I want it? Don't I? I really like that pattern. I think that's fun. So never throw away bits of tissue. You never know. And this one, there's a really wonderful square grid pattern on there that I like. It'll offer a subtle, busy pattern. I'm taking away the brown. Look at that. I love that. That's wonderful. That bright green, totally complementary because I used that same green when I painted that tissue. So here is a way of playing with composition. I've decided I don't like those speckled dots. I really, really love this technique, and I want you to use it often. It allows you to bravely check out what's needed on a painting without making mistakes. So let's put more of my glue, my matte medium, all over the page because that will activate and glue down that tissue. Make sure I do it everywhere. I'm going to put lots of layers of tissue down, so I want lots of glue. And again, we're not going to mask over all of this background that we worked so hard on. Some of that will still be revealed through the tissue transparency. As soon as you press down with the paintbrush and more paint, more matte medium, it not only glues down that tissue, but makes it blend. The white tissue paper borders, edges, almost disappear. The only thing that gets revealed now is the paint on the tissue, not the tissue. Just love this. Look at that. Look what we're doing here, people. Look at the fun. Now, who knows what you'll end up with your box of tissues, but it's just so fun. You just save every little smidgen because you just never know. And it's a lot easier to paint that tissue down than it is to paint with a fresh paintbrush of paint and paint something, because then you start making it something, and this is more intuitive. There's a close-up. There's that grid pattern that I love so much. There's still some red pencil crayon showing up on the bottom left and top right. I love it. Could have had that protective layer underneath there earlier. I'll end up ripping that page out because it's just a mess. So let's get started on the next. I pre-mixed some of that blue with some of the matte medium, just to make a very, very subtle, transparent, cloudy blue color. And I'm highlighting the pattern of that grid stencil paper. I'm sort of subtly encouraging that pattern over there without making it too loud and bold. So because the middle center left of the painting from that tissue I put down is very busy and dark, I'm trying to draw the eye over to this right side by doing something different, but it still makes the eye travel. And that's the whole point of an abstract, I believe, is you should give the viewer a journey. Now, this isn't a canvas for my wall, so there are no viewers, probably only me, but it does the trick. I'm painting a whole bunch over that top area because I didn't like how dark that color looked. It started to look brown, and I wanted to brighten it up. It's still damp underneath, and I'm adding a lot of gel here, so I'm using the occasion of broken up tissue to tear it away with my finger and reveal a new pattern. So I've given a new pattern and shape up there, a new sense of busyness, but I've also brightened the page up a bit with this glossy, it's basically glazing is what I'm doing right now. Glazing is when you've got a hint of color in a medium and you're spreading it around. It's something I do all the time. So I'm just using it all up. I don't want any waste, and I also want to just brighten up that top corner. And any of the areas where I find it looks a little too muddy, I'm going to use up this transparent, bright white blue. If there's any tissue that's too rough, I just pull it away with my finger. I thought it was a little bit too dark there, so I'm softening it. There were a lot of creases in the tissue paper there, and this paint is getting caught up in it there. You can see it. It will dry more transparent, but I like the look of that. It gives another pattern. Sometimes I do that on purpose for another layer of pattern right there. But it's also filling in those cracks to make a smoother finish on the paper. Gave it a good dry. I didn't let it dry enough, so this paper is going to end up sticking a bit, but that's okay. It shows you what can happen if you don't let it dry. So I've got a happy stencil print. It's not going to be that much white in the effect. I'm thinking about where I want to place it. I like those squiggle lines in the bottom. I'm trying to decide where I want this and where I don't. So I just tear off what I don't want, because I want to reveal a lot of that underpainting. Look at how it's transformed the page already. So I'm quite liking that. But the bottom left, I'm trimming away what I don't need, but I'm thinking as well that bottom left of the painting, the underpainting, I loved what was happening in that bottom left corner. So I'm going to tear some of this tissue away and reveal more of that. Plus, I don't want that white printed pattern everywhere. So you notice when I tried to peel it back, it stuck. So I don't want to force that. So I'm just gently peeling back and adding a healthy dose of matte medium underneath there. I'll fold the tissue back over there and I can paint it down. But this is where I decided I'm going to expose some of that bottom left corner because I really like that. So look at how magically the tissue just blends in with the background. Just pull away anywhere where there's loose tissue so that it stays adhered to the page. Place it down in place again. Another healthy dose over top to activate that tissue. It won't pull back over in that area, so I'm going to put even more matte medium over top there so it'll go through the tissue and keep it all firmly attached. Look at what we've done here. Look at the magic we've just done here. Seriously, would you even consider at the beginning painting that on? No. So because it was still very mushy, the tissue paper, I'm able to scrape away. I just decided I wanted to enhance that corner. I'm giving that corner a focal point. I've done a lot of gel medium there, so it needed a very good blow dry. So I'm doing what, if you've watched my first two videos, you know that at this point I like to take a fine tipped brush and enhance some of those dark squiggle lines. It enhances the squiggle lines and gives a pop of color, but it also, what I'm doing is I'm giving the eye a path to travel around the page. So I've decided that the path I'm going to give you for your eye would be the green. And I want to have the eye move like that pattern all through the page. I've sped this up so that you're not bored with it, but it gives you an idea of where I traveled with my paintbrush. It's a little bit, you need a little bit of care and patience at that point, because that took a little while even though I sped forward. I'm enhancing these bottom loopy shapes because I quite like them over that white. But as I'm doing this, I'm realizing already that I don't like the effect it's done to the page. Yes, it's made the eye travel down, but there's so much busyness everywhere else that it's competing. And I don't like competing elements. I like them to complement each other. So after I give this a good blow dry, I've decided I didn't like that. It's way too busy. It's a bit too jarring, but I want to show you close up all the different patterns that we have here still to work with. I decided that I needed more white, and I didn't want really bold script marks like the left half of this page is. It's too busy. So I wanted something cloudy and subtle, and this is doing the trick. Again, it's my soul journal. I want it to be, you know, happy, soft. I don't want jarring images is what I'm trying to say. So that's already working. Right now, when you place it over there, all you see is the white, but believe me, all those transparent areas of scribble that are there are going to pick up those background colors, and it's going to blow you away. Wait till we paint that on. Already it's looking magical, and I want to reveal that area, that grid area. I worked hard at revealing that. I want to keep it there. So a lot of this white is going to disappear once we put the matte medium down. It will blend into the background. Look at that. The yellow and the green and the blue in behind there has just popped forward. That's the magic of printed tissue. I want a little bit more. I didn't want a big white circle there with the grid. I want it to be a bit blended, so I want a little more in that corner there. But in doing a double layer there, I put too much white down, so I'm going to, while it's vulnerable and soft, I'm going to scrape away some of that white. That's much better, much better. Look at that background popping forward through those squiggles. So now what I'm doing, if you've seen my first two videos, you know I like to sort of make a cloudy white disappearing into the corners, and that's what I'm doing here. That matte medium that I had in the jar there had a little white with it, but not enough white. So I added more white. It's almost too strong. So I'm trying to smudge it down, spread it around. And don't worry, I'm going to dab that back. But this is a technique of giving a cloudy layer over your work without it being too cloudy. So you put on more than you need, and while it's still wet, you spray it with water and dab it with paper towel. And look what I did there. I just, in a cloudy, it's almost like a mist came over the painting. And so it has made that busy, busy page a lot more subtle. And you can spray and dab with tissue paper as much as you like to reveal as much. Now, while it was wet, I decided to scrape into it with my toothpick, which is something I like to do, but it was quite vulnerable and it kept tearing the page. So I didn't want to do a lot of that. But it's just showing you that you can do that. Now you could take it at this point with all that white, let it dry, and take your hand and smudge a whole new color over there, and it would pick up uniformly in a fog-like way that color. But I'm sticking with my blue, green, and white as my color story here. So I gave another spray, pressed really hard with the tissue paper, and look at that. More of it pops forward. So what I'm doing is I'm covering over some of that green that I painstakingly painted over there and didn't like, and making it more subtle. And now I'm purposely adding more light blue around the page because I want to make it even more subtle, number one. Number two, I want to bring out the blue. This is just such, I just feel like meditating when I see these colors. And I didn't paint within the lines. You can see I smudged right over so that the blue revealed some of the pattern underneath and filled in some of the transparent. If I would have just used the blue and painted in with a fine paintbrush, it just would have stayed busy. This was my way of softening the page. You had to give it a really good blow dry. That was pretty wet, so it definitely needed a lot of drying. I'm almost finished here. I'd like to have the word dream. I think that stencil, that particular part with the word dream, I love the funky font. It just suits my character. It's just a lot of fun. This is a gel pen that they're wonderful because they go over top mixed media. If you were to use a fine, wonderful micron pen or something like that and paint over it, you would wreck the surface, the tip of the pen. But these gel pens are meant to go over top mixed media. So what I'm doing, I'm speeding up the process so that you're not bored, but I'm basically filling in with the pen the entire word with white. It didn't show up too strong, so later on I touched it up with another layer of that, doing the same thing to make it stand out more. I don't always put wording on my painting, but I just felt like I needed to say dream on this one. I decided that I wanted a little more of the green in the top left, bottom left and top right corners. So I'm going to use my finger to gently dab it on. Again, this is more intuitive than using a paintbrush. I wanted a soft feathering of that color. It's a little bit too bold because it's popping out too loud, louder than the blue. I needed to wipe that and dab it. And it still looks a little too strong, so I'm spraying it with water and dabbing more of it away. The idea here is not to overpower that blue. So you can see by doing that, I've added the pop of green without overpowering the page. Now I'm taking off that tape again, pull it away from the page. And this is finished. I let it get really dry before I did this. Once it's dry, you can get your scissors and cut away all the tissue. So look at the way the eye travels around the page. Look at the balance. You've got busy patterns. You've got a blend of patterns. This is the final product. I'm really happy with it. I hope you like it too. That could go on a wall. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.